Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 472 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Eilon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our fifth book just came out. It's called Perseverance and How to Be a Great Fraternity or Sorority Alumnus. So I want you to go and pick up that book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, I've got my idea worth spreading for a TEDx talk, but I have to finish my doctorate before I give the talk. What I've learned about multitasking is that I get the best results when I focus on one major project at a time. So I promise to get to the TEDx talk in 2025 as my schedule starts to clear up. I'm going to be defending in February, and I promise you I'm going to be on it. Speaking of TEDx, let's talk to our next guest. Born in Communist Cuba, Dr. Emilio Justo and his parents immigrated to the United States as refugees when he was 3. Despite facing discrimination and poverty, Dr. Justo has achieved super sustained success, proving that lack of privilege is not an obstacle to attaining abundance and success. Since 1989, Dr. Emilio Justo has specialized in general ophthalmology and cosmetic surgery. He is renowned for his state-of-the-art refractive cataract surgery and, I can't even pronounce this, blepharoplasty.
Blepharoplasty, Mike, blepharoplasty. Come
Oh
on.
my
It's
goodness.
everyday language, isn't it? Come on.
Oh, it's too difficult for me this afternoon. Having performed over 50,000 such procedures, a two-time international TEDx speaker, Dr. Justo masterfully delivers his super sustained success strategies, delayed gratification, the power of pause, and the obsession advantage principles with unparalleled passion and vision. He weaves real-life stories and experiences from his decades of leadership, as well as lessons learned, so that his teachings inspire, guide, and stick. Welcome to the show, Dr. Justo.
Thank you so very much, Mike. That's a very kind introduction.
Hey,
And
I'm available. I'm available if you want to take me around the country. I can just introduce you on stages all over the country, but we'll have to do some more practicing. Clearly, I have not gotten it down yet.
It's interesting when you brought up the TEDx topic that you would like to do,
Yeah.
and you brought up multitasking, that actually that I'm considering that for my third TEDx is the true disadvantage. People think, including myself throughout my life, I would always brag, hey, I'm a great multitasker, but really that's a disadvantage. It's a negative thing, not a positive thing.
I
And
agree
so,
with you.
so I don't know if that's the subject of your TEDx talk, but it's actually what I was thinking about talking about in 2025 as well, when I have time to do my next one.
I think that is an idea worth spreading. I agree with you. I think we brag about the fact that we're so good at multitasking, but in effect, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. I really
Absolutely.
do.
Couldn't agree
Um,
with you more.
yeah, so I got to do, especially on these bigger projects. I mean, if it's small stuff, that's one thing, but if it's something that really means a great deal, and that TEDx is going to follow you for the rest of your life, whether it's a really good recording or it's a terrible recording, it follows you. And the
Right.
last thing I want to do is basically, kind of mail it in, quote unquote, and not do a great job and then have that follow me for the rest of my career. I got to really focus and I got to make sure that it's exactly what I want it to be. And that takes time, as you know, to prepare for
Yes.
TEDx talk.
A lot of time. A lot of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. So I want to be well prepared for that. And I think we'll do one at a time. But, I think what's really interesting, especially now, that we're in this political environment and we're constantly talking about immigration and things like that. I think your story is an important one because at the age of 3, your family fled the oppressive regime of Fidel Castro's communism in search of freedom and a better life. Explain to our audience how your journey as an immigrant serves as a testament to the power of delayed gratification.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it has been delayed gratification on so many levels, Mike. Um, just a quick story. I know we have limited time, but as immigrants, as Cuban refugees, when we were in Cuba, and my parents would tell me this one of many stories over and over. is that things were difficult to leave, to finally be able to leave. Well, first, when Castro took over, he did an inventory of everyone's property, including like dishes, silverware, et cetera, et cetera. When my father buried his cash in the backyard because when Castro took over, he asked everyone to turn in their money at the local bank for a new currency. And of course, the new currency was worthless because the old currency had value, and Castro wanted the old currency to continue on with his revolution. My father always distrusted Castro, buried his money in the backyard. Ultimately, he used that money when he befriended a Canadian diplomat to be able to purchase tickets out of Cuba through Mexico on the black market. But before being able to leave, Castro's troops came back to our home to do a second inventory, and everything had to match. Had we broken a plate or had we lost a fork, literally we would not have been able to leave Cuba. So that just goes to show you kind of some of the delayed gratification. But as we get into the United States and, things are challenging, we're learning a new language, a new culture. My parents worked very hard. My father had 2 full-time jobs. My mother, who had her doctorate in education from the University of Havana, went 3 hours south of Gary, where we were located, Gary, Indiana, to restudy. And I was sent 1,000 miles away to grow up with my grandparents in a little tiny college town called Tarkio College in the northwest corner of Missouri. My grandparents came over a few months after my parents. So for 5 years, my parents made the difficult decision at being an only child. They sent their only child for 5 years to be away from them and to grow up with my grandparents while they were getting reestablished. And so by the end of 4th grade, my parents had saved enough money to put a down payment on a home. Now my father could only work one job as a steel worker. My mother was now teaching high school Spanish. Finally, my grandparents and I moved from Missouri to Indiana, where I did the majority of my growing up. But everything, to me, the delayed gratification is just part of my life on every level, because that's what it was. Even delaying gratification as something as simple. I remember as a kid being taken to McDonald's. What a treat. My mouth would salivate thinking about McDonald's. I'd look at those golden arches, from the car window. And nowadays, it's nothing. We go to restaurants every day. We have food delivered on the spot with, DoorDash and Grubhub and all these things. And basically, it was all about, my life has been all about delayed gratification. And then it was so ingrained in me that even in school, I focused on long-term goals and not necessarily immediate pleasures. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't have fun. Of course, you have fun, but I had to prioritize. You have to prioritize and distinguish between what's at the end of that rainbow that you're really striving for versus that immediate pleasure that maybe you could put off and make better use of your time, your money, your resources, etc. So delayed gratification is at my core, Mike.
That's a great lesson for today's instant gratification
Yes.
communities because, listen, I got a couple of Gen Z kids and it's all about instant gratification. I don't think patience is one of their virtues. Let's put it that way.
Oh, I get it, man. I get it. I have 3 kids, a 13, a 17, and one that just turned 20 who's in college. And I preach this to them and they nod their head that they understand, they acknowledge it, but yet I don't really see them practicing it.
No.
It's a difficult concept. We're just in a culture that has evolved in such a way that it's all about instant gratification.
Yep,
We get sucked
100%.
in, through the social media, we get sucked in. We think that everything just happens overnight and you become rich and famous overnight. And no, that might happen 1 in 10 million, but for the regular Joes like me, I've worked my butt off throughout my life and I continue to at this stage of life. I'm working harder now than I ever have.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Listen, you have a 20-year-old kid. My kids are getting ready for college in a couple of weeks. You ended up going to school, both undergraduate and also med school at the University of Michigan. What made you decide that Ann Arbor was going to be the place for you to get all of this schooling?
Well, it's actually a very simple answer. I grew up again in Northwest Indiana,
Hmm.
actually an hour and a half west of South Bend, where Notre Dame is, right? And
Right.
so growing up as a teenager, I watched Notre Dame football. That was my passion. But when I applied to college, I actually initially was awarded the Eli Lilly Scholarship at a small all-male college in Southern Indiana called Wabash College,
Hmm.
which sends a lot of their kids to the Ivies. And so I was all set. I had a full 4-year ride, and my parents were happy. I was happy. My father even told me, he said, "Hey, you've done such a great job. If you end up going there, we'll scramble, put some funds together, and we'll get you a little car." But then shortly thereafter, I got accepted into this incredible opportunity at the University of Michigan. They have a 6-year accelerated pre-medical medical program where directly after high school, I was accepted directly into medical school.
Ooh.
And so, man, here I'm balancing the finances of having a free ride at Wabash, but having to put in 4 years there and then having to go through the application process and the stress of going to medical school and then another 4 years. Whereas I could go to Michigan, I'd have a ton of student loans because my parents had very little,
Mhm.
but yet I would go through it in 6 years instead of 8 years. I wouldn't have to go through the stress of applying to medical school. I wouldn't have that car that my parents said that they would get me, but that was okay. Again, I delayed that gratification as well because it was more important for me to go to Michigan and be in that special program. I mean, they only accepted 10 out-of-state students nationally. And I was one of those 10. And I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. I'm so pleased I went there. But of course, the downside is that immediately in going there, um, I no longer was a Notre Dame fan. So it's all been go blue, right? So I mean, I bleed blue.
You gave up your affinity for Notre Dame. You just turned in your card and said, "Yep, no longer with these guys.
No,
Go
no,
blue."
well, no, go Wolverines, baby. I bleed blue. I bleed blue for all you college kids out there, man. I bleed blue.
What a great story. That's really good. I have heard of Wabash, for sure, for sure. They actually have a TEDx program over there as well. And one of our other speakers, Dr. Louis Profeta, who is an emergency room doctor in Indianapolis at a Trauma One level center, he did his TEDx talk there. So we know that college well, and also a good school too. So nothing
Yes,
against them.
absolutely, absolutely. They told me at Wabash that was the first time that anyone had ever declined that Eli Lilly scholarship.
I bet. I bet they were
Only
looking at
a,
that, going, "How did he decline this scholarship?
yeah,
What
yeah,
happened?"
yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, listen, it obviously all worked out for you because you're the founder of the Arizona Eye Institute and Cosmetic Laser Center as their medical director at age 27. You've added 2 locations since 1989, plus you have that certified ambulatory surgery center as well. I mean, you're a renowned ophthalmologist, cosmetic and ocular surgeon. What makes this business so successful over the years?
Well, truly, I preach this to my staff, and I'm blessed because I have a number of staff that have been with me for over 25 years. So that's not very typical, but I mean, I have this nucleus of people that are just great. And as I've always preached to them, is when I see a patient, right? Like today, I'm in clinic, I'm doing eyelid surgery consultations all day. And when I walk into the room, I consider myself, in a good way, in a positive connotation, I consider myself an actor on stage. And what I mean by that is that when I walk in there, I mean, it's all about first establishing that patient rapport, getting to know the patient, asking about their background, where they grew up, et cetera, and creating that rapport where they have trust in me. And at the same time, I have a sincere affinity for them. I want to know about them and I want to do the best for them. I treat them as if they're an extended part of my family. And that's the way I've always handled my patients in my practice. And I think just through that, organically, the practice has grown and evolved. And right now, our practice is really pretty much word of mouth referrals. We don't do any external advertising. It's just word of mouth. We do have some internet exposure. Our website is very well known, so we get some people from the website. But that, in my estimation, is really the key when you're practicing medicine. I've never been one of these people that just jumps into the room, jumps out, goes to the next patient. I mean, I spend time, so I'm not a high volume person, but I have enough volume to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, that's very rare, I tell you, in the medical field. Usually, doctors are running around from room to room and they don't get to spend a lot of time with you. So I think that's
Right.
refreshing, and that's probably one of the reasons why so many customers stay and then give that word of mouth referral that you're talking about. And you know what? That applies to any business. I mean, listen to your customers and care
Right.
about them. You do those two things, I mean, you can build whatever business you want for any product or service.
Absolutely. In any business, we're there to
Yeah.
serve our customer, our client, our patient. It's all about service. And when you serve other people, you will be rewarded immensely in the future. Again, it may take a little delayed gratification to get that reward, but well worth it. Trust me,
Yeah.
well worth it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that delayed gratification. I mean, you've talked about it here in this interview. Your first TEDx talk was about this delayed gratification, your superpower to success. It ranked number 3 in the world in 2023, has over 6 million views today. Why do you think this particular message went viral? And talk about how it has changed your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful thing. I don't think about it too much. I mean, my wife is the one who really thinks about it and thinks like I'm, some special person as a result. I just think somehow the message took hold. I do read the comments that people post on the YouTube videos, and I'm impressed by a lot of them, and I reply back to each one. It may take me sometimes a little time to reply back, but I sincerely do. And I think people really out there, not just in the United States, but worldwide, really took that message to heart and really complimented me on bringing this to the surface. So I don't know. I don't have the secret sauce that I could teach other people. I don't think to master 6 million views, but I'm very blessed. I'm very grateful, and I'm very humbled by it.
Yeah. What an incredible story. That's just remarkable, those results. And you have the second TEDx talk as well. It's called Unleashing the Drive Within, the Obsession Advantage. That is also done very well in TEDx terms. I mean, over 1 million views on that one. And I'm thinking about failure because I think for me, people see all the success that I have today on stages all across the country, on college campuses, high demand. But what they don't see is how many times I failed. I mean,
Right.
and so I think that's the piece that's missing. Why should we embrace failure as a temporary setback and actually a step forward towards that ultimate success?
Yeah, I couldn't believe that any more strongly, Mike. I mean, we have to learn, and I preach this to our kids, that we have to learn to embrace failure
Mm.
and to use it as a jumping off point to learn from our failure and then to take the next step. Um, I think if I think here to myself, I think Confucius said that the greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising up each time we fall.
Mhm.
And I think Confucius was absolutely correct that we must rise up, and that takes resilience to do that. And that's what I talk about also in that Obsession TEDx talk, which has only been out about 8 weeks actually. So I'm amazed it got 1 million views in only 8 weeks. Um, but again, I think it's part of my mantra, my so-called Cuban triad that I talk about, which is self-discipline. Number 2 is resilience, which ties in with obsession, and what I call my dynamic duo, my Batman and Robin effect. And then ultimately, the third one is delayed gratification.
Mm. So fascinating. So fascinating. Listen, I agree with you completely. I think the premise on both of them are excellent. I never feel like I really fail. It's like, either I win or I learn something. I mean, and so either way, I'm a winner as
Right.
far as I'm concerned. And I think it goes back to, maybe even our childhood. There's another TEDx talk where the guy is talking about tinkering. And, he's talking about essentially where it's like a camp for kids and they essentially build projects on their own. They give the kids hammers and nails and saws and all of these tools, and they build stuff. And of course, there's going to be miserable failure, like some kid's going to build a roller coaster and the thing never gets off the ground. And you know what? But they celebrate that. They celebrate the fact that it failed and they tried. And there's like a big party, to celebrate this failure, this epic failure. And what did we learn from it, And I think maybe that's the way that we should be thinking. It's just brilliant.
Yeah,
So,
there was one author that, and I wish I could remember his name, but basically talked about the fact that when he comes home to see his kids every night, that the first thing he asks them is, "What did you fail at today?" In
yeah,
a positive way. And he wants to encourage them to fail at something, because by failing at something, it also implies that they're getting out of their comfort zone and they're trying new things, right?
right.
And that's important because a lot of kids and youth out there are afraid to get out of their comfort zone,
Yeah.
and that's kind of sad because we need to be able to get out of our comfort zone, fail, learn from it, and then try something else.
Yeah, and young people should be failing often. I mean, what a better time to fail than in college because there's very little repercussions, right? I mean, if you
Right.
fail, so what? Like nobody cares. It's totally fine. But like if you fail like older in life and you're, maybe 60 years old, well, that could be a catastrophe because now you got a family, you got a mortgage, you got all these responsibilities. So I feel like if you're going to try some wild off the wall idea, the time to try it is in college, right?
Right, absolutely. And boy, I had a lot of failures in college and even in my professional life, Mike. I mean,
Yeah.
so I would love to sit here and tell you and your audience that my road has been smooth, but it hasn't. I mean, I keep failing and keep doing stupid things. Just to share a quick one that I'm embarrassed to talk about, but I talk about it. I mean, I talk about it in my book. Is it 20 years ago at the height of the real estate craze that was going on, right?
Mhm.
I went to a seminar and I got all hyped up. And next thing you know, in the course of 12 months, Mike, kid you not, I acquired 20 residential real estate properties, each valued at between four to $500,000. And I don't know what the hell I was doing. And my wife thought that I was crazy. But ultimately, I found out sooner rather than later that I could not sustain that because the amount of rent coming in could not sustain the mortgages that I was paying. And so it nearly, sent me into bankruptcy, but that's where the resilience kicked in, and my wife and I buckled down. She was my support, and she never really pushed my face into the ground on it. She just basically said, "Hey, you've been dealt some lemons. Let's make lemonade out of it and let's figure this out." And we did. And ever since I got out of that fiasco, these last 20 years, the journey has been straight up. So we all make stupid mistakes, and I will admit my mistakes.
Yeah, good for you for being transparent about it. I too have made plenty of mistakes in the professional world, and you learn from it, and you just get better. I mean, that's all we can do. But thank you for sharing. I think that vulnerability is important, so that way the college students feel empowered, and if they do fail, it's okay. I mean, you just keep moving, and you're probably going to fail again, and that's okay too. So really, really good stuff. I wanted to talk to you too about social media because I know that Gen Z is on social media a lot. I don't know how much your kids are on social media, but
A
I mean,
lot.
my kid, yeah, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be dropping her off at Rice University. Okay. One
Oh,
of the
nice.
top institutions in the country. She's
Right.
getting ready for her freshman year there. But she was honest and transparent and said, you know what, Dad? She's like, sometimes I spend 5 or 6 hours a day on
Oh,
TikTok. And she recognized that she wasn't like talking to her friends. She was going down this rabbit hole where, essentially you're in isolation for 5 or 6 hours a day. So she deleted the app on her own. I mean, I didn't
oh
ask her to
man.
do it. She just recognized that the behavior was not what she wanted, and it was incredibly addicting. So, how can our students break free of their social media addictions?
Yeah, well, first, kudos to your daughter. I mean, that's just phenomenal that she had that insight at such a young age
Mhm.
to do that because I know. I mean, I sometimes go on Instagram. And man, the moment I do, the video after video after video, they're so interesting. You get sucked into them.
Right.
And next thing I know, I've been on there for 30, 45 minutes. I'm thinking, what the heck am I doing? I got more important things to do. But basically, as far as the youth out there, again, practicing a little delayed gratification, maybe setting some boundaries on the usage, and replacing the screen time with some, productive activities, exercise, hobbies, school clubs, and then by focusing on our studies, and as we complete certain tasks, we can then reward ourselves perhaps by then spending some time on the social media. So it should be more of a reward rather than the daily task, in my view. Again, a difficult thing to get young people to do. But again, I don't know. Boy, you should interview your daughter and see how she came to that conclusion on her own, because that is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal that she was able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think same as you. I think she recognized I could be doing much more productive things. And I think she just recognized that and said enough. And she was able to break free of that addiction. And listen, we know the science behind it. We know that you're getting dopamine in your brain every time you get those notifications, and it's hard to stop. And it's designed that way. So boy, oh boy, we have our
Yeah.
hands
But
full.
if one fills their life, if as a youth or college student, if you fill your life with other rewarding activities
Right.
that can benefit your health, or just yourself individually, by staying busy with these other important rewarding tasks, then you don't have time to screw around with that. But I think when one is a little too idle, which sometimes I see at times with some of our boys, that maybe they're a little too idle, and so what do? They get out the phone. No, there's some expression. Maybe you can help me with this. So, when you're idle, it's like the devil's workshop or something
It
like that.
is.
You gotta stay busy, but with positive things that will benefit you now and into the future. Even things like, one thing that took me years to develop a habit of, and I could kick myself, is audiobooks.
Mm.
I have an almost 1 hour drive just one way to work every day.
Mhm.
And here for years, I've been using this hour just to basically listen to music, which I'm a music aficionado, but that's not really benefiting me. And
Right.
it wasn't until a few short years ago that I started getting into audiobooks. And it's like, wow, I could have enriched my life so tremendously. And here I've wasted all that time, which you'll never have back. Every hour that you waste, you'll never have it back.
Yeah. Really, really good points. I love all of that. Great habits to get into. I mean, we should talk to you too about just academic success. Do you have any strategies for academic success in college?
Well, again, sometimes easier said than done, but I think that self-discipline is key, Mike,
Hmm.
and having a consistent study schedule,
Hmm.
which can be difficult. And then when you have academic challenges, practice that resilience that I preach. I mean, resilience is key. And then ultimately, the delayed gratification is to help prioritize those long-term goals over the short-term distractions. So when you kind of stay organized and seek help when you need assistance, that'll help that academic journey. But you got to be organized. You have to be consistent, have a study schedule, and not let these distractions get in the way. Again, easier said than done, but I just remember my days in college, and yeah, I sometimes slacked off, but ultimately I knew when it was time to really get organized, and I did. But you can still have fun. It doesn't mean, for any college students listening, it doesn't mean that you can't have fun in college or in your youth. You can have fun, but you got to moderate your fun, and also be disciplined in what you do, because self-discipline is like a muscle, right? The more you practice it and strengthen it, the easier it becomes, and the bigger it becomes. So I think self-discipline is key.
I love that self-discipline message. Very good. I mean, financially, you've done very well over the last 20 years. Talk to our listeners about achieving robust financial health when all of them are dealing with really big student loans right now. Affording a home, I don't have to tell you what the interest rates
Yeah.
are on that right now. It's almost impossible for them, given those high interest rates that they have today. How can they actually achieve all of their financial goals?
Well, again, sorry to sound so redundant, but I go back to practicing that delayed gratification because one has to learn to prioritize savings, number one,
Mhm.
and debt repayment. And I even talk about these aspects in my book because although I was the son of immigrants who essentially rarely used a credit card, right? My father had the immigrant mentality, buy things that you can pay cash for. I don't practice it specifically that way, but I do use credit cards, but I pay the credit cards in full every month, you know? So just judicious things like if you're going to have a credit card, you've got to be able to pay it off every month. If you can't, then you're really overspending. You got to learn to save, like our 20-year-old the last few years when he's home during breaks, he works and he works very diligently. But I said, look, you know, you've got to set up an automated savings where you don't see it. And every check, you know, it's got to be a minimum of 10%, maybe ideally 15%. And if you're super aggressive, maybe 20%. But some of that just comes out of the check before you get that net amount. It just automates into your savings account. You know, early in life, set up retirement accounts, you know, like IRAs or Roth IRAs, because the power of compounding is extraordinary. And I didn't learn this really, it didn't hit me till well into my adult years because my parents didn't have a lot. And so they didn't really teach me these concepts. But saving, investing conservatively in your future and your retirement accounts, it may seem so far down the road, but I think if you do the maths, if you can, I know it's a big number, but if you can save up, let's say $100,000 somewhere in your 20s, and you just invest it in a simple index fund, which is very low fees, hardly any fees, an index fund that follows the market like an S&P 500. And if you take the average rate of return, which over history is about 10% a year, after 40 years, I think the numbers are something like you'll have about $16 million.
Ooh,
And just
that's
think about
amazing.
that out of 100,000, which is a lot of money. But if you put that away, that will grow through the power of compounding.
Mm.
So we don't think about it because again, it's all instant gratification. So you earn a paycheck. What do you want to do? Oh, you want to go and have a nice dinner. You know, you want to get a fancy car. You know, live just with the bare necessities early in life and put some money away. And I think you know, and debt repayment, right? Try to pay down that debt. One of my goals, you know, I had lots of student loans, and when I got out in the workforce, I really worked hard at paying off that debt as quickly as possible, and I got it paid off because that was number one on my priority list. I did not want debt.
Mm.
Um, and that's key. It's such a great feeling, really, when you don't have much debt. You know, if you pay off your home, right? I'm kind of getting a little bit more advanced for college students, but let's say that they get a home, a small home, a starter home, you know,
Mhm.
whether they're married, single, it doesn't matter. You know, and your typical mortgage, right, is what, a 30-year mortgage.
Yep.
But hey, just go ahead and if you can make a principal prepayment every month, just a small amount to that monthly payment, it's amazing. That 30-year mortgage, you'll end up paying off perhaps in half the time, literally,
Mm.
just by adding a little bit and making sure that it goes into principal, not interest, of course. And just little things like this can be so huge. But
Mhm.
again, it all revolves back to that delayed gratification, Mike.
Yeah, great tips. And you're absolutely right. Our listeners who are in college right now, what you have that Dr. Justo and I don't have is time. And that compounding interest is going to be able to work in your favor. But to his point, you really need to start investing young. You need to start investing early, and then the compounding interest is going to mean a huge amount of money for you long term. So I think all of that is really great. It's just hard, you know. I know if I put myself into the shoes of a college student, and I still remember when I graduated from college, you know, I felt like somehow that I had earned a nice car. I should drive
Right.
a brand new Mustang because I've earned it, because I made it through college and I
Right.
graduated and I had my own job and I needed my own apartment. And I couldn't live with somebody else and save money. I needed to have my own place. And so, you know, you think that you deserve all of these things, but to your point, if you had that delayed gratification, then I think, you know, the end would be much nicer.
Yeah, you know, it's difficult, Mike. It really is. But if the youth of today's society can buy into that delayed gratification, the rewards in the long term will exponentially increase.
Yeah.
You know, and a simple story that I share, which you know may or may not be that relevant, but you know, back at Michigan, when I was in school, right? What does every kid do? They get season football tickets, right?
Yeah.
And you know, University of Michigan, it's a blue blood program in college football. And so I distinctly remember that we would buy back then it was a 6-pack of tickets for the season, and these were end zone tickets, and it would cost me $36 for the end zone tickets. But what did I do? I didn't go. I think I went to one football game the whole time I was at Michigan. What I did was I ended up scalping them, and that $6 end zone ticket, I could make $50 on it. So that was a net profit of $44, which I then could pocket. I could use for a little pizza on the weekend. I could use it for a little savings, et cetera. And now, you know, fast forward in the last decade or more, 10, 15 years, I've been taking our entire family to Ann Arbor from Phoenix, where I am now, and we go twice a year. You know, I get tickets on StubHub, which I pay up the wazoo for, and we sit at the 50-yard line and go to a couple nice games, you know, Ohio State game or so you know, so that's kind of a little bit of delayed gratification there, but well worth it. I certainly am a believer in it, Mike.
I love the stories. Great stuff. Now, we do love great food here at the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. So the next time I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, where should I be going for a great bite to eat?
Good question. So it depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for a breakfast joint, my family and I like to go to a place called Butters, and
Mhm.
there's a couple of them. It's great breakfast food. If you're looking for kind of a nice kind of burger, but kind of a little bit not super high end, but medium high end, there's a place called the Roaring Fork, and they're famous for on the menu. It's called the Big Ass Burger. I don't know, I think it's like maybe half a pound or more. It's just incredible. But if you're just looking for a hole in the wall, just kind of like your kind of slightly sleazy place with good food,
Uh-huh.
there's a place in Central Phoenix. It's called Harvey's Wine Burger, and they also have great burgers. You know, real greasy and all that, but it's just it's like a bar type burger place, so it's kind of dim light and you know you got your kind of you know trucker type crowd in there, and but it's really nice, fun. People are just genuine and authentic. So those are three places. But maybe Harvey's Weinberger for lunch and maybe Roaring Fork for dinner.
That sounds good to me. I mean, you can't go wrong with a good burger. So those are some excellent spots. I love it. All right. So if our students, if they want to buy your book, it's called The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success, or perhaps they want to bring you in to come and speak on their college campus. Where should they go to connect with you?
Well, they can go to my personal website, which is Dr. with the dremiliojusto.com. So it's DREMILIOJUSTO.com. All the appropriate links and information are there. The book is available both in print. It's on Amazon, and soon will be within the next couple weeks. It'll be on Barnes and Noble. But it's on Amazon, and it's both in print, and I did my own audiobook narration, so it's on Audible as well, since I'm a big audiobooks fan, as I mentioned to you. I had a wonderful time, by the way, narrating that book. I mean, gosh, I could do that as a living. I love narrating books. And so it's available Audible, Amazon, and just go to my website. If you want to email me, just go to Dr. Justo at dremiliojusto.com, Dr. Justo, Justo at dremiliojusto.com. And I get all my emails. I always respond personally to anyone who emails me. So
That is amazing. I love the life that you're living. And now, if you don't want to be a medical director anymore, you can narrate books. There's something
hey,
for you to do.
I'm up for it. I'm up for it. I'm always searching for new challenges, Mike.
I love it. All right, to our college students, if you enjoyed this talk with Dr. Emilio Justo, I want you to like this and I want you to share it on social media with some of the other college students on campus, because I think this is really, really just life-changing, this conversation on delayed gratification. You can go and watch the TEDx talk with Dr. Emilio Justo. You can go and buy his book. Again, it's called The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success. I think it's critical to learn all of these tips and tricks early, so that way you can reap those rewards like Dr. Justo is talking about later in life. And maybe you too can sit at the 50-yard line in Ann Arbor against Ohio State. We'll see. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Emilio Justo. I really appreciate the time you spent with us today.
Thank you very much, Mike. It's been a sincere delight and privilege. Thank you.
All right. And to our audience, thanks again. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. We'll see you then.